welcome to the DemiTaste podcast. Today is Thursday, November 16th, the week before Thanksgiving. I am your host, DemiTastes, and I'm joined for the second week in a row by Duckphill Platypus. And today we would like to talk a little bit about holiday gift giving. And if we have some time, we'll also get into what every whiskey nerd wants to do around the holidays, which is to invite your friends and family to do a whiskey tasting with you and give you tips for how to make that a successful attempt. I think we've all tried it and we've all had mixed results at one point or another. So hopefully you can learn from us. I forgot to charge my headset today, so I've got these on, and if I have to step away from the computer to pour something, I'm not going to be able to hear you. Yeah, with that out of the way. Oh yeah, also today's going to be a real short one because I am getting ready to travel for the holidays. So this will be the last time we'll be able to do this before Thanksgiving. I think there's
Yep.
a on the off chance we might be able to do something, not next Thursday, obviously. That's Thanksgiving, but
Some
seeing what
point.
happens, we might decide that we have a topic worthy of mention in the days surrounding, provided that we're available. So before we get into the main topic, I wanted to draw attention to the fact that Clear Creek, we've had Caitlin Bartlemay on before. Clear Creek just yesterday unveiled a bottle redesign. And I have posted an article giving essentially I had an early look at it and had some time to think about it. So I essentially posted my review of the new bottle. And spoiler, I kind of love it. I think that it's going to be a really good change for the brand. So since we are short, I'm going to just leave it at that teaser. I'll put a link in the description so that you have a chance to read my thoughts on it and I don't have to rehash all that here. Oh, another fun bit of news. Our other friend, Joe O'Sullivan, who is now at Minden Mill, not Minden Mills. I have to correct that in my head. Minden Mill Distillery in Carson City-ish, Nevada. They have just unveiled their new website. So they're starting to open up bookings for the experience, they're calling it, which I assume is some form of distillery tour. Joe has let us know that he anticipates there will be new products coming out of Minden Mill starting early next year. If I'm not mistaken, it might have been late next year. I think it's early next year. I'll double check that. So we're
I
really excited to
believe.
see the things are starting to come online, and we are beyond excited to see what Joe produces there. I think that's all for my news.
All right. So, shall we get to gift giving advice?
Absolutely.
So, I feel it's only fair to lay the groundwork of. I used to do this every year on Twitter, or what is now X. I had a Twitter thread every year around this time of year where I basically, made a list of things that I thought would be good gifts for whiskey enthusiasts and a handful of things to avoid. And the handful of things to avoid was, is not a common um, topic. It has been done before. And I find it is almost more useful than a here's what to give your particularly because a lot of the not all of them, certainly not all of them, but a lot of the here's what to give your whiskey drinking friend, your card game playing friend, your musician friend, etc., are sponsored by manufacturers of or sellers of items that are on the list, and so some of them you have to take with a grain of salt. I
Yeah, and
typically
as
spur.
always, now is a great time to say we are not sponsored by anybody. We
That
may
is
have an
correct.
affiliate link or two coming up, but we are definitely not sponsored by any whiskey brands, and nobody's been giving us money, so no need to worry about that. These are our authentic recommendations and non-recommendations to help you find a gift for the whiskey enjoyer in your life. Let's first, I guess, tackle the elephant in
Shall
the
we start
room.
with some?
So first of all, whiskey stones. It's almost a meme at this point. Whiskey stones are unfortunately not a good gift. And we'll go into a little bit of why, just so we can be complete on that. Um, but pretty much every whiskey enthusiast has probably received from a well-meaning friend or family member a gift of whiskey stones or something similar at some point in their life. And there you go. Is that the bullet-shaped
Yeah,
one that you're carefully hiding
yeah,
the tip of?
yeah. Basically, so it just looks like a cylinder. Yeah, and
Yep.
it comes in this, handy, uh, intentionally shaped holder. Um, and these are worse because they're not stone; they are stainless steel.
Yeah. So let's talk about why this seems like a good idea, first of all. So,
Right.
everybody has probably heard about like, oh, you don't want to water down your whiskey, but you've also heard of whiskey on the rocks. So the obvious thing to do when you
Mhm.
see an advertisement for a product like reusable, essentially ice cubes, freeze this piece of metal or freeze these rocks, and then you can put these in your drink and reuse them a whole bunch of times. The reason that this ends up not being such a good deal is the transition from solid ice to liquid water takes a lot of energy, which means your ice will actually take more heat out of the drink before it waters down the drink, or returns to room temperature, let's say, than something like metal or stone, which doesn't have a phase transition. It just can't hold that much energy. So it seems like a good idea, but it doesn't actually accomplish that much in terms of cooling. That's the
So,
superficial
whiskey
reason it's not.
stones.
Yeah.
Let's back up for a moment and cover
Oh yeah.
what they physically are.
I should
So they're
find like an
typically
example.
limestone or soapstone, typically cubes, although I have also seen them carved into icosahedrons, little animals, spheres, that are stone, sometimes stainless steel, and they are solid, frequently relatively hefty for their volume. Um, and typically they're sold in packs of three or four. Um, yeah, that's a good example. I have found one of the biggest detractors that I point out to people who then go, "Oh, that kind of makes sense." If you've ever taken like a deep sip of something, forgetting that there's ice in there, and ended up with ice like flowing into your nose or into your teeth, imagine that, but with a chunk of rock or a lump of stainless steel. It is not very fun.
Yeah, so
And
that is essentially the short version. So the superficial they don't cool very well. Like yes, sure, it does accomplish the desire of not watering down your drink, but it doesn't keep your drink cold. And
yeah,
for most whiskey people, that won't actually be a problem because most of us actually prefer to drink our spirits neat at room temperature. Um, and that's just like that's just the way it is, right? um
yeah,
Usually these whiskey stone kits, like if I just put that back up for a second, like they'll come with some cool stuff like this box, and it may have a coaster and it has these tongs. Like these are actually cool things that you could still keep using. So like this is not the sort of thing where you need to worry about you've given somebody a gift and they're going to like turn around and sell it or regift it or just be like, "Oh, this was worse than nothing." Like you don't have to worry about that really. It's just that there are potentially better gifts.
hmm
So that's really what we're on about here, right? Like if you've ever given somebody a gift of whiskey stones, like I can speak from personal experience, I loved that gift, right? I thought that that was super thoughtful. I wouldn't have bought it for
hmm
myself. That's a hallmark of a good gift.
yeah,
And I did use it. And I just, it's not the way that I prefer my whiskey on the rocks anyway. And I think it is potentially a good thing you can use for guests, right? Be like, oh,
oh
here's
yeah,
a cool thing, right? A lot of these barware type things are as much presentation as they are practicality. Why would anyone want a solid object other than ice in their drink? Yeah, that's a good question. I
yeah,
think some people will ask themselves that question, and some people will just be like, oh, I just like the idea of not watering down your drink. That's
hmm
really the motivation is like put something cold in your drink that doesn't melt because you're not adding water to your drink. So that's I think the motivation. Now I can give a recommendation for something that does serve this purpose, but also actually works the way you'd expect. There's now depending on how you feel about plastic, I'm sure you can find BPA free and all that. There are whiskey stone type objects that are not stones. They're in fact a plastic cube that are filled with something like water or a water mixture that does freeze. So when you put that, so first of all, it's plastic. So if it clinks your teeth, it's not going to hurt. It's not that hefty. It's not that solid. And the other thing is that it will actually cool down the drink and keep from watering it down. So if you are looking for a gift like Whiskey Stones, I would recommend looking for plastic liquid filled.
The best part about them is they're frequently available in bright colors like pink, orange, green, and yellow.
I moved into an apartment once and found something bizarre underneath a fridge. I was like, what is this thing? And then figured out like a year later, oh, that was a whiskey stone or the plastic equivalent.
Mhm.
They are like, if you don't know what it is, it's like, why did anyone ever have this thing in their kitchen? Because sometimes they're not shaped like cubes, right? They'll be shaped like
Right.
my mom had a pack of them that were shaped like fish. Um, when I was a kid,
Ooh,
and were,
good
little
for
like
tiki
this
drinks.
this big.
So, in a similar vein, you mentioned glassware, and I think glassware is actually a really good alternative gift. So, there are a handful of styles of glasses. There are these American whiskey or bourbon style glasses. There are, of course, the classic Glencairns, which everybody knows and loves. Copita nose and glasses. You can even, pardon the dustiness, get really big, hefty, chunky Glencairns, like this one, which
The McCarth
has
Cairn.
distillery branding on it, which is a good thing because that is a good segue into another thing that I think is a solid gift idea is distillery swag. You know, like I've got a couple of distillery T-shirts that I really like. I've got distillery glasses, none of which I have at hand. Um, mugs, mugs, mugs.
Mm-hmm. Now, for a gift like that, you're going to want to make sure that your giftee is not the type who's overwhelmed with the number of mugs they already have.
Yes,
Because sometimes a gift like that ends up being a hassle, and you don't want something like that.
right. And I think that falls into the category of knowing who you're gifting to,
Absolutely.
because there are a lot of ways that you can give what would ordinarily be a really great gift and end up giving somebody something that they just can't utilize. Um, a good example of this in sort of a weird way is one of my aunts several years ago gave me a mushroom growing kit. Very cool. The mechanics of it were interesting. It was really cool to read the instruction manual. I cannot stand the texture of mushrooms. So I basically left it in my closet and grew mushrooms and then didn't really do anything with them
Now, on the
because
other hand,
I
my wife loves those mushroom growing kits. So, every gift
yeah,
has a ideal recipient.
right. And like I said, very cool. If I liked mushrooms, that would have been a perfect gift. I mean, it was still a great gift because it was really interesting. It was cool to read the little science pamphlet on how mushrooms work, but I wasn't I don't like mushrooms. Um and another common thing that I see is at a good gift in theory, often in practice not as much, are bottles of really high-end whiskey. Like if you go into a store going, I want to get them something special, something expensive, something fancy, and you buy them a bottle of this. Ooh, fancy,
It does
nice
look very nice.
purple container. It's the Noble collection. It's an expensive thing. Inside the box, there's a a cloth dice bag that comes with a bottle of whiskey, and it's all very fancy.
I like that you
And then
called it a dice bag because you've buried the lead about what you use it for.
yeah, yeah. I may or may not have several dice bags, or sorry, Crown Royal bags full of dice. Um, but this, as expensive as it is, as beautiful as the presentation is, for a whiskey enthusiast who's looking for interesting and sort of different and exciting whiskeys, this simply is not. It is very good, um, but it is very good in the sit down and don't think about it and enjoy drinking something that has a couple of good flavors that um, you know can be appreciated by anybody, but not necessarily something that I would spend time and effort to sort of really get invested in and look at. But on the
Yep.
other hand, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't try. Sorry, I'm just dropping everything over here.
Right. So I would say there's two sides to this particular type of gift as well. Um, so sorry, I was just distracted by something. Um, so you also need to know your recipient for gifts like this because while there are whiskey enthusiasts who are all about, especially when you're growing your own collection, like Phil and I have, you're about value because you have, most of us do have a budget, believe it or not. You have a budget and you want to make that budget go as far as it possibly can, getting the best liquid you can for the price. That's how we go about buying bottles for ourselves. But there may be something that feels inaccessible that you may be in a position to buy for someone that you really care about, and chances are you will have heard about whatever bottle that is. And then there are other types of whiskey enjoyers who are not necessarily the enthusiast reviewer podcaster types that we are, but have a favorite brand or have a few favorite brands. They know by reputation, they don't care that they're expensive, or they even think it's a good thing that they're expensive, right? Like expensive is better. And if that's the type of person that you're buying a gift for, it's not a bad idea to stick within the brands that they know. Just be willing to spend the price it's going to take to get something special from, say, Macallan or Dalmore or um, any of the like Lagavulin or Bamore, these Scotch distilleries that are really well known that tend to be on the expensive side, or for example, Hennessy, like a Hennessy XO, or something that's up there in the lineup. A brand that they usually will go for, but wouldn't necessarily go for the highest of the line. If you're in a position to afford those top of the line bottles and you really want to get a special whiskey or spirits gift for somebody, knowing the brands that they like and knowing what they have and taking that next step up, that is a good way to buy a gift for them.
Yeah. One of the things that I know is true of me and of many of the people that I do drink with is that there are brands that we talk about enjoying. Um, Anybody who has known me for a little while knows that sort of a constant theme of any conversation about whiskey that I have is uh, my recommendation of trying Catoctin Creek. And so, if you know that there's a brand that they have a particular penchant for, um, or a particular style of whiskey they have a penchant for, um, it is not unreasonable to take a peek at what they have and buy based on that. So, like for example, I love Catoctin Creek. If somebody was buying a very nice gift for me, I mean, any Catoctin Creek I'd take. I love them all. This is Rebel Rouser. It is pretty much one of the most expensive items that they offer. It is a limited release, a bottled and bond rye whiskey. It's 100% rye whiskey. It is aged a minimum of 4 years, and it is fantastic stuff. One of my favorite bottles of whiskey. As you can tell, as special as it is, look how far it's gotten.
Yeah.
Um, and like, it doesn't just apply to, craft brands. You've got a friend who orders Jack and Coke every time they go out, or maybe you know that at home they drink a lot of Jack Daniels. You might consider something like this. Nice and fancy, not actually terribly expensive,
Yeah, let
and
me make
a
that bigger so you can see.
yeah, and something that they may not necessarily buy themselves.
Yeah. And for anyone on audio only, this is the Jack Daniel's single barrel rye.
Yes.
Slightly different
The
bottle shape. It's shorter and my wife says that bottles like this look like they could be weapons. Uh
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's got a solid half inch of solid glass at the bottom.
yeah. It's a really attractive bottle though, to be quite honest.
Oh,
And
oh yeah.
even for people who are not normally fans of Jack Daniel's Old Number 7, a lot of them still like this type of bottle, these special releases from Jack Daniel's.
Fair
Uh
warning: if you're buying a single barrel from Jack Daniels, they tend to be a bit proofy.
yeah,
And
some of
by
them are even in that infamous hazmat range. You'd be unless you were particularly hunting for it. This is the sort of thing if you knew what you were after. Chances are you won't find something like a Coy Hill Jack Daniels, which are infamous for being around 70% alcohol. That's hazmat.
yeah,
The threshold for hazmat, you can't legally put it on a plane, is 70% alcohol because it is too flammable if there should be an accident. Uh, and believe it or not, even though that's the ideal the ideal alcohol percentage to kill living cells, there are drinkers who enjoy that kind of thing. I usually stop around low 60s%, is kind of
yeah,
where I usually stop enjoying things, but not exclusively. There are some things that are surprisingly good that are even higher than that. But
oh
yeah,
yeah,
if you're buying a gift for a whiskey lover and you don't know that they love that kind of thing, I think we can recommend staying away from anything that is up there.
right. Proof wise, but that I just that's the only single barrel Jack Daniels that I have. If you know that they're a Beam person, they've always got a bottle of Jim Beam. A solid pick is something like Baker's, which I realize now I should have gone and grabbed from way up there, but I didn't. Um,
And you're going to
and
behave yourself and not stand up and turn your back to the camera like I do all the time.
yeah, I'm trying. Also, because I'd have to step up onto my step stool to reach because I'm very short and my shelf is very tall.
We could watch an accident in real time. It could be
Yeah,
entertaining.
yeah. As we
Just
joke at
kidding.
work, workman's comp, workman's comp,
Yeah.
workman's comp. We we had a manager one time. We were up on ladders passing speakers back and forth, and jokingly chanting workman's comp. We had a manager come back and go, "Hey, hey, it doesn't count if you're chanting workers' comp." Which, by
Hmm.
the way, isn't actually true, but it's a good
Sounds like,
joke.
yeah, sounds like a loophole. Um, okay, let's take a step back and go back to glassware for a minute. So
Yes.
obviously, we could do an entire episode about glassware, how it affects what you're drinking, what you should pick depending on what you're drinking. When we have 2 or 3 hours to go through a whole thing on that, we probably will. Uh, for the moment, pretty much what you need to know if you are not a whiskey enthusiast and you're thinking about buying glassware for somebody is that the features of a tasting glass, no matter what it's for, wine, sherry, spirits, whiskey, brandy, the common feature of all of these things is that the place where the liquid comes up to has a wider diameter and the sort of nosing or the opening of the cup is narrower. And what that serves to do is allow for some additional evaporation, but then focusing the aromas. And this also guides how close to your nose you can get the liquid so as not to singe your nose. So you want something that's reasonably uh has enough space above the liquid to not be harsh on the nose. and also this general shape of wide on the bottom and narrow on the top. And there are many alternatives that will absolutely work. I like to describe this sort of like if you're playing like a racing game or something and the cars have different stats, you'll have like handling and acceleration and top speed and all that sort of stuff. The Glencairn works as a really nice neutral middle. It's good at just about everything. And then you'll have more specialized glasses for high proof, low proof, bourbon, scotch, Irish whiskey, cognac, Armagnac, sherry. They are all more tradition than anything else, but they have an idea behind the design. And some of these things can be quite unusual looking, but there will be a purpose to them in the marketing. And chances are, if you know that a whiskey lover in your life is looking for new glassware, they'll be happy with just about any well thought out
Oh yeah.
gift in this realm. And to address a comment in the chat, Genji says that he likes novelty shot glasses as cute gifts. Um, I I think I agree for the right type of consumer. Phill was saying he buys them for himself. I, on the other hand, let other people buy them for me because I think that's like a good way for people to give souvenirs to people who they know drink. And I don't necessarily aspire to have a collection of shot glasses, but they are good for entertaining, right? You're like, oh,
Yeah.
my friend went to New Zealand and brought me back this shot glass, or my friend went to Chicago and brought me back this shot glass,
Mhm.
and like you have a little bit of a story to tell, a little bit of a connection with your friend, and that sort of thing. So me buying shot glasses for myself, I'm not so inclined to do that. We tend to buy Christmas ornaments. That's kind of our thing. Or fridge magnets, more fridge magnets, because the tree's only up part of the year, but the fridge is always there.
I am guilty of buying myself shot glasses that I can't show on stream. I have one somewhere that I bought in, I believe, Myrtle Beach. It was either Myrtle Beach or outside of Disney. That is literally just a woman's torso with like bathing suit with the place on it. It's in a box somewhere. And I've got one from an anime store that a friend of mine used to work at that he was being a jerk about, oh, you can't come in and talk to your friend unless you buy something. So uh, I bought all the like 50-cent candies every time I went in there. And then one day he didn't have any more of the 50-cent candies. So I bought a shot glass. Um,
Yep. As long as
it's
we're talking about bottles that we've got, by the way, I did forget to mention, I got a box of single cask nation bottles yesterday, and I wrote a
very
review pretty
nice.
much right away. I stayed up way too late writing that review because I was so excited about all of them. Um, I think that there's something to be said. This is going to be a more involved, researchy type of gift.
Mhm.
But there's something to be said for if you know that a friend of yours who likes whiskey is a big fan of a brand, and you're willing to put a lot of research in. So like brace yourself for research. Look into independent bottlings, because independent bottlings, basically what that means, and we'll probably have a whole episode on this at some point. So single cask nation, don't mind the crossed out single and double, because that's kind of a nerdy in joke. Single cask nation. Here's one that just says single cask nation, and you'll note here. Let me zoom myself in. You'll note below the name of the company that there is a distillery name as well. Let me see if I can get that to zoom in a little bit. So we have Virginia Distillery Company bottling here. Um, Now I did this research and bought these bottles for myself. But usually what happens with independent bottlings is that they have a particular flavor profile or flavor profiles that they like, and they'll go to a distillery and they'll pick out casks, barrels and whatnot, and take samples of them, and then decide, this one really tickles us. This is something that we like, and we think that the people who like our stuff will also like this. And these tend to be exceptional casks. Things that may have been an unusual spec, or older or younger, something that may not have fit in a distillery's usual releases. So these barrels never got blended in. what independent bottlers do essentially is discover these so-called off-profile, not bad, but just different bottles that are often quite exceptional, and then bottle those usually at cask strength. So if you know that, for instance, so I mentioned this one, this is a Copperworks. I'm a fan of Copperworks, and I'm also a fan of Single Cask Nation. And I decided to buy this bottle for myself because I figured that the combination of two brands that I like could do no wrong. And I was, I opened this yesterday and I've already had 3 pours out of it. This is the fastest I've gone through the first half of a bottle. So that's what's in my glass right now. I am a big fan of this particular release. So independent bottlings, don't look past them. Let's,
They are more common in the UK and in Scotch whiskey. For example, there are a lot of independent bottlers. The Red Cask Company is an independent bottler that focuses on sherry cask matured and sherry cask finished single malt whiskeys. This is a 9-year-old Blair Athol bottled at cask strength, uh, matured in non-described sherry casks, finished in first fill PX sherry, um, bottled at 57%. Um, it's not what's currently in my glass, but like, look at that color.
and it's a cool looking bottle too. So
Oh
one
yeah,
one nice thing that can happen with independent bottlings is that oftentimes their bottles are quite attractive. So you can get someone a brand that they like, a distillery that they like, and get them a interesting looking decanter as well, so that this is visually a different thing from what they're used to. And you're not really taking too much of a risk because you know that they like the distillery already. And even when there are differences, bottle to bottle, barrel to barrel, uh, it's still going to be the core distillery character. So someone who's a
yes,
fan of a distillery, so for example, me, absolutely. People have just given me single cask McCarthy's that I didn't have access to, samples or bottles, and I knew without even opening them that I would love them because I love everything McCarthy's does. So that is, buying me a McCarthy's is like a definite winner of a gift. Another cool thing, so my wife knows that I also like Lagavulin. She bought me the Lagavulin 11 Offerman edition, basically without even asking. I mean, she did double check, but she wouldn't have had to because she knew that I liked it. Um, and that ended up being a wonderful gift. That was like, she came home from Costco and brought me a bottle of whiskey, and that like never happened. So I was like, oh yay, that's amazing, thank you. You know,
so I've got to be a weirdo for a moment. Another thing that you can get through independent bottling that you can't really get anywhere else is Scottish single grain whiskey.
hmm
There are a couple of blended grains that you can get. And one of the benefits of single grain Scottish whiskey from independent distillers is you frequently can get some frankly absurd looking age statements for reasonably affordable prices.
yeah. So something like a 40+ year age statement in a single malt, especially from an original bottling, it's likely to cost you thousands, probably tens of thousands of dollars. I would
The
be willing to bet that that 42-year age statement there cost you around $300 plus or minus 50.
about $350 including
There you go.
shipping.
Yeah. So grain whiskey tends to be a lot less popular, and that's why it's so much easier to get a high age statement with it.
But it is still really really good and interesting, and it is a little bit more of a stretch, but if you've got somebody who you're not sure what to get them whiskey wise, you want to get them something nice, you can find some fairly decently aged, 20, 25 year single grain distiller or single grain Scotch whiskey from independent bottlers for around $150 to $200,
Yep.
which, for some people is a great deal of money. I can count on one hand the number of times I've bought bottles in that price range, but that is an option
hmm
and a pretty good one.
Yeah, we're definitely getting into like the bougie kind of gift recommendations. So let's bring it way
Yeah,
back down to earth. Um, I have gotten
notebooks.
a couple of gifts throughout the years. Okay, let's yeah. So from a particular friend, loves getting us gifts when she travels. So she always gets me something whiskey related. Um, so one of those things were a lovely set of whiskey rocks as well as a coaster and all that other stuff. And I did use that. Right, it's not my most common thing to use, but I do use them, and I appreciate that gift. Another thing is I think I've shown them off on stream before, but I don't have them near me. There was these sort of diamond shaped glasses with multiple facets that don't have a bottom. They were called like the dragon glass or something along
Oh
those
yeah,
lines.
yeah, those are cool.
uh, those are really cool looking, and I love taking those out and sharing. When I only have two of them, so it has to be like me and just a buddy, and like you want to just drink out of something fancy. They're very cool, and the fun thing about them, because they're that diamond shape, they've got a point on the bottom and a wide bowl and a narrow rim. So it turns out they're actually good nosing glasses. So that sort of checks two boxes of being something cool to drink out of, something cool to look at, and also effective. And the only reason I don't use them more often is because they are a handful, literally. And
Yeah.
also, you know, if you've got a cluttered desk like I do for something like doing these streams, you'd be afraid of like knocking it such that it rolls off the desk, and that would be no good. And that goes for there's other types of like bourbon glasses and so on that don't have a bottom and kind of roll around a little bit if you let them. So you have to be careful with that kind of thing. They can be very cool looking,
Mhm.
but there's a practical concern sometimes with those. And another thing is that when she travels to some place that I can't travel, she will often bring home a bottle of whiskey. It's not necessarily the most expensive bottle of whiskey, but it's definitely something I wouldn't have bought for myself or I wouldn't even have access to. And once again, the best kind of gift to get for somebody is something that they're likely to appreciate along some dimension and is something they would not or could not buy for themselves. So those gifts are wonderful gifts as well. And one of my favorite gifts that she actually got me one year for my birthday, I think it was last year, is a whiskey infusing kit. Uh, so,
Yeah.
or you maybe could say a cocktail infusing kit. So it's a box that had like 10 vials of various dry things like dried bitter orange peel and cocoa nibs and cinnamon and these sorts of things, and like cinnamon bark, not like cinnamon, and and like a filter bag or something like that. So the idea is that you would fill up a sachet with various quantities of these things in whatever recipe that you wanted, or follow an existing recipe, and then put it in some whiskey uh, and let it infuse for a while, weeks, months, you know, whatever you want. And this ends up being like a whole experiment and activity for the whiskey lover. And I can tell you, as somebody who has a significant quantity of whiskey, not everything I buy is a hit with me. There are some things that I just won't ever touch. And, you know, I didn't like it for some reason, or I have something that like tickles the same itch but better, or something like that. And sometimes a lot of these things are not terribly complex either. So I would be totally fine with doing something with them. So I've got the Kirkland Canadian whiskey, which is very plain. It's not bad by any means. It's just kind of boring. Perfect base for infusing whiskey. I wouldn't use it for anything else. I mean, like, not saying that like infusing it is so good that I wouldn't use it for anything but infusing. But like the whiskey is, you know, the whiskey is just sitting there unless I use it. And infusing it is a wonderful thing for me to do with that. And so there's a good chance that if you were going to buy a whiskey infusing kit or a cocktail infusing kit for somebody, they probably have something on their shelf that they're just going to get rid of one way or another, and you've just given them a fun thing to do with it. This isn't the sort of thing that somebody focused on buying whiskey is going to think to buy for themselves, but it's the sort of thing that as soon as they get it, they know this is an awesome gift. So, can highly recommend that kind of gift.
I think that the only other things left were a couple of other glassware things that I've seen that I don't have experience with, but have come very highly recommended. One of them is basically a square rocks glass with a silicone mold to make like a little slanted piece of ice, which is a similar concept to like the ice molds, which frankly I wouldn't get much use out of, but a lot of whiskey people would because a lot of whiskey people even if they don't usually drink whiskey on the rocks, frequently have somebody over who does. And that is a great way of sort of reducing the amount of water watering down of the drink while also doing more than like a whiskey stone. You know, it's basically a surface area difference that allows it to, you know, it's a high energy interaction because it is melting, but it's a lower surface area of the ice, so it doesn't go as quickly. Um, and then also the little rocks glasses with the like cylindrical cutout in the side, or not cutout, but you know, cylindrical cigar holder molded onto the side. I have some friends who love those.
Right? It's not
Um,
for me personally, but there are a lot of people
right.
who enjoy whiskey and cigars together.
And that's another one of those, like, you just have to know who you're giving to. Um, but there are some good suggestions to think about otherwise.
Yep.
Um, and I've pretty much exhausted what I had in mind. Oh, right, notebooks. Notebooks are a good thing to buy someone who does do critical drinking of whiskey. Um, I have a
Absolutely.
lot.
I one year received moleskin bound or raw leather bound notebooks from two different people for my whiskey tasting notes. And they both of them felt self-conscious about that after the fact. And I was like, no, it's fine because like one of these is like a binder that I can add to and keep for however long I want, and the other one fits in my pocket and is also like they serve different purposes and they're both wonderful.
Yeah.
Um, uh, Also, you know, I every year had a, you know, hey, look at what local craftspeople are doing because handmade gifts are fantastic. Um, Pens made from whiskey barrel, um, custom handmade glassware
Yeah.
by a local glass
Shameless plug.
blower.
Uh yeah, shameless plug for people. Yep, don't do that. Don't almost drop your lovely homemade glass. Yeah, so that glass there is from Thumper or Thump Glass in the Whiskey Lodge, who does commission glass blowing, and he was inspired to uh, replicate a sort of Glencairn-like shape out of his own Pyrex glass.
And it is fantastic, by the way. It is a great shape. It fits in the hand nicely. Um, and I've used it repeatedly recently, and it is not clean.
Fair enough, but that's a well used and well loved thing.
Oh
Let's
yeah,
see. Oh yeah. Also, shameless plug for Phil's turning of barrel staves into pens.
yep,
That's Phil's own craft project there, which is low volume, but they are wonderful. Yeah. Taking a step back to whiskey and cigars, Genji says the
yeah,
Robin Sherbatsky combo. Yep.
yeah, yeah. You know, it's weird how often that specifically is portrayed as in sort of media as being a sophisticated thing. And most of the people that I know who do that do have that sort of general vibe about them.
Yeah. There's like it's not for me personally. Like I have a hard time pairing whiskey with food. Even pairing whiskey, which I consider to be a strong flavor that I want to savor and pay attention to, and comparing that
Hmm.
to a cigar, which is a strong flavor that I mean I'm not well versed in cigars, so like I don't know that I would be able to pick up subtlety. I've had one or maybe two cigars in my life. Um, but like maybe I could tell
Yeah.
the difference between a good one and a bad one. Like I don't necessarily know that I would
Oh,
pair
you'd
an
be able to
excellent
tell.
whiskey with a cigar personally. Um, I
It
like the one time with my
it's
dad we had whiskey and cigars. It was before I was into scotch, so I don't know what we were drinking and I don't know what we were smoking. It was just we were at a casino on a cruise ship and it was like let's have whiskey and cigars.
yeah.
And that's another thing, like you just stack up your vices, right? Like gambling, whiskey, cigars, right? Like just everything that's bad for you and just like pile them on.
So I will say that when pairing whiskey and cigars, it depends on what you are focusing on. Because if you have a really strong flavored cigar, something bold with lots of like heavy notes and a, really interesting complex whiskey, the cigar and the complex whiskey are going to basically leave you with like something not terribly enjoyable and kind of bland and a good cigar. If you are looking to focus on the whiskey, get yourself something mild and sort of gentle, and that is a good idea. Genji, you should not smoke. I say that as somebody who regularly imbibes a toxin and enjoys it, and who used to smoke cigars. You should not smoke cigars or cigarettes or
Yeah.
pipes.
PSA.
But
You have to disclose that you smoke when you do a like a life insurance application or something. They
yep,
don't really. I mean, you also have to disclose how much you drink, and you should tell the truth because
yeah,
if you don't, it's fraud.
yeah,
Um, but there's definitely like any smoking at all puts you in a high risk category. Moderate
hmm
drinking does not. So between the two, the practical solution is drink more whiskey. See the whiskey
Yeah.
lodge up there. See the whiskey lodge logo,
yep,
and don't smoke at all. Just don't. Yeah.
yeah. Um,
Also,
Also,
uh,
once
also,
you get,
drink more whiskey with that asterisk. With that asterisk, responsibly. Don't drink too
yes,
much.
yeah,
Hashtag drink responsibly.
everything in
Yeah.
moderation. And like alcohol, once you start smoking, it is really hard to stop.
Mm.
Um, and it can permanently change how you taste things, which is an interesting sort of look at how tasting works. And we could probably do a whole video on that at some point.
Yeah, I,
Um,
I wouldn't know what to add, but yeah, you're totally right. Stuff like that. Uh, man, we should get an expert for that discussion. That feels like an interview right
yes,
there.
yeah, an
Yeah.
olfactory
Okay. Speaking
specialist.
of, we've gotten to the end of our hour. Sorry that we started a little bit
Yep.
late. I was getting my article wrapped up, and I had a couple of other things to wrap up. So unfortunately, we started late. But we do have to end on time because I have to go get ready to take a flight tomorrow. Um, just to cover a couple of other bits of news. I don't remember if I mentioned it last week, but I did make a note for myself to mention it here. Um, hang on, where to go? Did I lose that? Yeah, okay. So I wrote an article about the Skagit Valley malting closure, which is not super new news, but hadn't been covered from the perspective of American peat as far as I could tell, at least not in depth. And so I did a short write up about what the closing of Skagit Valley malting means for American peat. And this is not to say there's not going to be any more peated malts coming out of America because there are still plenty of distilleries like Clear Creek makes McCarthy's, which uses Scottish peat. Balcones uses Scottish peat. Andalusia even uses Scottish peat, but they malt on their premise. So they actually import the peat itself and then malt the grain here. There will still be smoky whiskey. Not to mention there's also mesquite and other types, cherrywood smoked and applewood smoked
Peachwood.
whiskey that exist in the United States. But this is specifically about Skagit Valley malting provided Pacific Northwest peat, um, peated malt. This phrase is always, I spent a lot of time workshopping this phraseology because the fact that the malt comes from Washington doesn't necessarily mean that the peat did. But in this case, it does mean that.
Malt
Washington
peated
State,
with Pacific
yeah,
Northwest
yeah,
peat.
exactly. Washington State barley peated with Washington State peat. And that was the first time American peat had been used and is currently the only that I'm aware of that was using American peat to malt their barley. So that was a highly significant development. And the closure of the malting house is also highly significant. But the silver lining is products were brought to market using American peat, and they are good. and I have both of them, and I will be reviewing them at some point. They were behind me. I just pointed behind me where they were, but they're not there anymore. I put them away. The
They're
Copperworks
proof of
042 release and Westward Solemn #1 are both peated, American peated, Pacific Northwest peated barley, and they are really good. And I think the fact that they're good and that they have been commercially successful, 042 sold out relatively quickly. Solemn is selling pretty well as far as I know. And Westland is definitely planning on making future editions of that with the barrels that they have laid down. On that note, last Wednesday I also interviewed Tyler Peterson, the new master distiller of Westland Distillery, and we had a short conversation on this topic as well. When the podcast gets published, that will be in there in the first handful of episodes. So look out for that. I will put links so that you can read and all that good stuff. And forward looking, do a little bit of self promotion. We have actually a few interviews lined up. We're getting a pretty good pipeline of interviews coming up. So I don't have exact dates for all of these yet, but we're working on narrowing it down. What I do know is that we will be interviewing on stream Jason Parker of Copperworks on December 7th. So that is 2 weeks after Thanksgiving. We will also be interviewing Jonathan Harris of Westward Distillery sometime soon. Date TBD, but it could be November 30th. And we will also be interviewing Cedar Ridge. I had to check his title. Master Blender, I believe. Murphy Quint. Possibly on December 14th, but we'll see because we have to work around his schedule on that one.
Those are all exciting. I can't wait to get to interview some people because I've missed out on the last couple.
Yep. At some point, no promises on exactly when, we will have Joe back on once he is finally able to lift the veil of what he's been working on at Minden Mill. But he is essentially, we're chomping at the bit to be able to talk.
Oh yeah.
Both from his side and from our side. He wants to tell us what's up, but he can't yet. And we want to hear about it, but we can't put pressure on him. We'll also be having Caitlin Bartlemay back in the next couple of months to talk about brandy.
Yes. Because we did hold that episode hostage, didn't we?
Right. But she's just waiting for us to tell her when. We will have Alex Myers of Big Gin at some point. We are setting up a non-alcoholic beverage distillery. I don't have it in my planner right now, but the aim is for us to do that during the next dry week, which should be the first week of January. So we'll actually have an interview during dry week, which will be an interesting change of pace.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've been chatting so much. I just saw the chat, and I'm not sure that I know what the context is. We'll field that in a second.
Yes.
Let me see. Let me check my planner one last time and see if there's anything else of note. Yes, early next year we'll be talking to Adam Polonsky. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, from Lost Lantern.
I'm excited for that
let's
one.
see. Oh yes, we're also trying to schedule the head distiller of Killoan, whose name I did not write down in my planner, unfortunately. That's embarrassing.
But
so we've got a lot of stuff lined up, right? We're probably going to be alternating between these Whiskey Lodgecast chats where we just talk to each other and interviews roughly every other week for a while now. So that's a really exciting place to be as a podcast. And I'm working on even more industry networking and connections via the people that I've already interviewed, putting me in touch with other people. So we've really got this ball rolling. And I also am going to be doing a lot more writing of the book in the meantime, because I don't want to keep promising that there's going to be a draft. I want to be able to hand people a draft. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yes. Rich has clarified. Yes. The master distiller, head distiller of Killoan is Brendan Carthy. Yeah.
I'm working on getting a foot in the door to get us so that we can talk to the folks at Catoctin Creek because I want to talk about I want to Cardi, Brendan
Brendan
Cardi.
Cardi.
I want to talk about my favorite distillery, um, and I've got an excuse to head out to visit them again because I didn't get the distillery exclusive bottle yourself bottle or the red wine cask finish that I saw while I was there picking up my barrel, which I want. I have 14 Catoctin Creek bottles, but I could always have more.
So I'm trying to understand what's happening in the chat right now. Your flagrant talk of whiskey has summoned me from the internets. Hello from Chicago. I can only imagine that that means that the Twitch algorithm has decided to open up my stream for people on the homepage, and that's how people
Cool.
came in. Unless Phil, you recognize the username.
I do not, but that's okay.
Well, that's cool. Welcome in. Thanks for joining.
Yeah. Unfortunately, you've caught the tail end of our discussion, but we are here most Thursdays. Not next Thursday, we will not be.
We'll be
And
in a turkey coma next Thursday, I imagine.
yeah.
Hey, we were in the suggested. That's awesome.
Oh,
We're
cool.
going up in the world.
Yeah. And as for where we are located, we're sort of scattered all over the place.
Yep. I'm
Um,
in the Pacific Northwest. Phill is in Virginia,
yep.
and our other co-host who's not here today is in Arizona.
So we cover a pretty good stretch of the states. We need to get you're in a liquor store. That is extremely cool.
Aha. Well, now I have to drop into the Twitch chat and make Nightbot give the lodge link.
Ooh. Ooh, will Nightbot work again? Yes.
It does. Yeah, I figured out how to make it work. I don't know what was going on for a while, but it does work now.
Cool.
Yeah, so we love producers and enthusiasts alike in the Whiskey Lodge. So I've just dropped a link in the Twitch chat for the Whiskey Lodge. I'll put it in the YouTube description as well. That's where, we come on here and we talk for an hour or two or three once a week about whatever's top of mind, usually focused around a topic. But we talk all week long about anything that comes up in the Whiskey Lodge. And, everybody is welcome to join and participate.
Yeah, absolutely. We are a growing community, and we value a lot of interesting and diverse people in the lodge. And people who run liquor stores are really interesting to talk to because they have a unique perspective that you don't see from producers and or from a lot of consumers.
Yeah, sometimes it just takes catching people on uh on a nerdy forum to really get into uh the talking shop aspect of the hobby. Which is
Ooh,
incidentally, there's a lot of people that I've interviewed already once, and it sort of included the distillery tour, and it's like, okay, we've just gotten to getting to know each other. I've gotten the baseline, and I've actually had to go back or schedule another interview with them because what I really want to do is get into the nerdy nitty gritty that hasn't been covered a dozen times on some other interview. Uh, and
yeah,
you just have to sort of get over that hump of making sure that everybody's on the same page about the basics before you really get into the details. And we are the type that really want to get into the details. And one of the
oh
ways
yeah,
that we like doing that is in actually inviting producers to come into the Whiskey Lodge and chat with us there, because oftentimes the sort of inside baseball talk is one question at a time and a short conversation and not necessarily interview length content, but it just depends on what we get into.
yeah. Like learning exactly how dunder pits work was basically because Joe mentioned it in the lodge, and a bunch of us were like, "What's a dunder pit?"
And he was like, "You'll hate it." And we're like, "Sounds cool. What's up?" Like, it's nasty. And we're like, "Tell us more."
You've already sold us.
Yeah, he got to he shared pictures from the journal, the distilling notebook of Steve McCarthy about Dunder, like little like phone photographs of this journal, and he was like, "Yeah, I want to try that." I can't disclose who, but I've had conversations with two distillers who've made their own dunder pits. I can say who one of them was. Jeff Longenecker. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that last name correctly. At Seven Caves was one of them, and one of the first things he did when he started the distillery, which is basically a rum but like specialty spirits. He makes whiskey, whatever. The first thing he did at the distillery before he could even release alcohol was make his dunder and then like run it through the still and save the setback to put back into the dunder and just like do that a few times to get the dunder really going. And it's amazing. Like one of those, you know, when you talk to somebody about something they're really passionate about and they just light up, uh, he loved everything about all of the products that he made, but it was obvious to me that one of the things that he loved more than anything else was his dundered rum. And if I had let him, he would have just gone on and on about it, and that was great. I hope to have him on, but he doesn't seem to do a whole lot of public speaking, so I'm not sure if we'll actually get him to come on for an interview. However, I could recommend, if you're ever in San Diego, go to visit Seven Caves. Make sure you make an appointment first. That's like a California rule, basically. You have to have an appointment in order to drink the amount of alcohol that he wants to serve you. Otherwise, he just won't let you in. Um, the website is the numeral seven the number seven caves, the7caves.com. So highly recommend that if you go to San Diego. That, you know, we'll keep plugging his distillery. Really cool stuff. If I wasn't plugged into my computer right now, I would go show you that bottle again. But he has an American single malt that was distilled from a sour beer and finished in his own peated American single malt cask. So that was really cool. Oh yeah, Phil, you weren't on the stream when I brought that up and showed it.
No.
I'll have
No.
to send you a link so you can go back and watch that discussion, or we'll just talk about it again probably.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna have to actually listen to some stuff while I'm in the warehouse at work now. So.
Well, once I
I'm
get
not.
that podcast going, so all these podcasts get turned into audio, it'll be a lot easier for you to listen.
Yes.
That's more reason for me to actually go get that going. Yeah. All right. So since we're talking about holiday gift giving and holiday don't gift give, this this comment from the pit boss is actually highly relevant. If you have heard that a whiskey enthusiast in your in your life is looking for a specific type of bottle, like Old Forester birthday bourbon that Phil's showing, like Blanton's, like Pappy Van Winkle, do your research to find out that these things are allocated. And if people are saying, I'm giving Phil a chance to show off. And if people are saying on the internet that these things are hard to find or they're allocated or anything along those lines, don't go into a liquor store and ask if they have any Blantons. Please just don't. They don't know you, and even if they did, they probably really don't have it. And you're just making a fool of yourself and making them feel like crap. So don't do that. No gift is worth making other people feel like crap.
And just general advice to all the people out there, whiskey enthusiasts, non-enthusiasts. If you go into a store and you go, "Hey, I've heard about this thing called Blanton's, Van Winkle, Elmer T. Lee, anything like that. Do you have any?" And they go, "No." Don't ask them if they can check in the back. They don't have anything in the back that isn't in the front of the store.
Yeah, the store is the warehouse. There is no back in a lot of cases.
And
yeah. So the other thing is that, like, if you're a well-meaning friend or family member, yeah. So the pit boss says, as soon as you walk in, we know what you're looking for. If you're the sort of person who's actually like an enthusiast and you're looking for that, I think that's absolutely true. But there's a lot of people, I think, that get the wild hair idea that trying to find these allocated things is worth their time, and they don't understand. And like, some of them will look totally lost. Some of them will actually just be clueless. Yeah. Right. Through no fault of their own. They may end up asking. And I think if you're that person and you end up getting a negative response from the store, or you get laughed at or anything like that, it's helpful to understand it's not you. It's that they've been dealing with this all day, every day for the past 5 years, especially around this time of year. I had a coworker. I told I told my coworker I was into whiskey, and he was like, "Oh, have you heard of Pappy?" And I was like, "You're shitting me, right?" And then he was like, "Oh yeah, no, I used to be able to get Pappy all the time. It was really good. It was like a little bit expensive, but you know." And then all of a sudden, I just couldn't find it anymore. And I called up a store, and I asked them if they had any Pappy Van Winkle, and they laughed at me and hung up. And I was like, "You really don't know."
Oh man. So every time I tell this story, somebody asks me how old I am. I remember walking into my local ABC store and they had Old Rip, they had the Lot B12, Elmer T. Lee, Blanton sitting there, Eagle Rare gathering dust. And it feels like just a year later, gone.
Yeah.
And there is that little part of me that's like, maybe I should have ponied up those big bucks to buy that pretty expensive bourbon. And then I'm like, but at the time, I was looking at, hey, this Maker's Mark stuff is kind of expensive. Is it worth it? Talking to the guy at the liquor store. And yeah, that pretty much sums up, life. You always miss out, but it's never worth it.
All right. Well, we are well over time for our hour today, so I think it's time that we wrap up. We didn't get
Yeah.
into how to run a whiskey tasting for your family, but I think there's going to be plenty of time before Christmas to get into that, even in between the interviews that we have. So I think we'll just leave it there for now. Maybe Ian will be able to join us for that as well. Um, so I'll just for the benefit of the new people in chat, I'll just wrap up the way we usually intro. Thanks for joining for another episode of the DemiTastes podcast. Today, a conversation between people from the Whiskey Lodge, which we call the Whiskey Lodge Cast segment. Here on DemiTastes, we do a little bit of tasting and a lot of talking. Usually, we talk about whiskey. The best thing about whiskey is the conversations that we have. So we get to talking about a little bit of everything. Before you leave, make sure to like, subscribe, follow, share, comment, all that good stuff that's good for the social media algorithms. You can find us at our social links, which I'll put in the YouTube comments. I'm DemiTastes just about everywhere. My reviews are on Reddit as DemiReticent. DemiTastes.com is alive and functioning, and I've been putting up my articles and reviews there, slowly filling in the backlog. I guess that's just about all we have for today. So, Phill, it's been a pleasure talking to you as always. Until next time, I'll see you in the lodge. Cheers.
Sláinte.